All right, you guys. So I think we are going to get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jenny Elise Ramirez, and I am the Development Officer here at Domestic Violence Solutions.
And I'm Julia Black-DeVray, the Marketing and Communications Officer.
Thank you all for spending a portion of your Wednesday evening learning how to support our teens' relationships. February this month is Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, mouthful. And we've been working hard to educate the public. 1 in 2 teens experiences physical, sexual, digital, and/or emotional abuse from someone who they are in a relationship with. It is so inspiring to see your commitment and compassion to the youth in our community.
Before we begin, let's go over a few housekeeping items. Because we are in webinar mode, all participants are muted and video is off. Please type your comments and questions directly into the chat box and make sure that you select all panelists and attendees from the drop-down box because Zoom has the default as just panelists only. Our wonderful executive director, Jan Campbell, will be the moderator for tonight's educational conversation. Being a mother herself of 2 daughters who are now adults, this is a topic near and dear to her heart. Take it away, Jan.
Well, thank you, Jenny, Lisa, and Julia. Thank you for all the hard work that you put into this. I do want to thank our panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedule to participate with us this evening. This is a serious topic that we are all committed to. I think that you will see the level of dedication of these 4 people. I hope to learn a lot myself, and I'm sure you will too. So please, if you have questions, type them into the chat. We're here with you, I think, for about 45 or 50 minutes. We'll try to get to all the questions. So it's my job to start out by introducing our panelists, and then we will break into questions, and then we will take questions from the audience. So let me start out with Christy Stillwell. And I have the honor of knowing all of these people except for Raul. So I'm very happy to have Raul on tonight to get to know him a little bit. But Christy is the founder and director of What is Love Teens. Christy has an MA in counseling psychology. And for the last 20 years, she has worked to implement a healthy relationship curriculum into schools across the country. She facilitates workshops, educator trainings. She speaks in schools, juvenile detention facilities, universities, and youth organizations. She works with legislators to help them understand why healthy relationships need to be a priority and how relationship violence intersects with our community's mental health crisis. So we're very honored to have Christy. Our next panelist is Rachel Steidel. Rachel is the founder and executive director of YouthWell. Rachel has an MA in clinical psychology. She has over 25 years of experience in management, marketing, community engagement, and strategic planning. Rachel was the founder and former publisher of the Parent Click Network, which I found extremely helpful when my kids were going through high school and college. Rachel is the mother of 3 daughters, so she has a lot of experience. Raul Reyes is a program specialist with Fighting Back Santa Maria Valley. He has an MA in school counseling and a BS in criminology. He's been with Fighting Back Santa Maria Valley since 2015, and he's been implementing a foundation for success, conflict mediation, and restorative justice approach at Pioneer Valley High School. Raul is a community resilience model teacher, and he teaches several different parenting classes in the community. His greatest passion is being able to advocate for all youth who are at times unheard. Our last panelist is Steve Delira, and Steve is the Deputy Executive Director of the Family Service Agency. Steve holds a BA in Public Sector Management. His commitment to at-risk youth and the community is well known through his 30-year career with the Santa Barbara County Probation Department, beginning in 1987 as a juvenile instructions officer and most recently as a Deputy Chief Probation Officer since 2009, until retiring from the department in February. Delira has been an active member of several committees for the Lompoc Unified School District and La Purisma Catholic School. So welcome to all of you. And I think we'll jump right into the questions. We are going to begin with Christy. And let me get to my paper. So Christy, I know that you have a ton to say. And what I've heard you and you're fabulous. What I think we'd like you to focus on this evening is on parent partnerships. I think that's a key element in protecting and guiding our teens. And I know that you're an expert in that particular area. So maybe you could start by telling us why parents are such an essential partner in preventing dating abuse.
Jan, thanks so much for having me be part of this conversation tonight. And I want to say thank you to all my fellow panelists. I think this is just such an important topic. And I think that it's something that we should be talking about more regularly. I feel like we get a lot of attention in February, which is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. But one of the things that I want to say to parents is that this is a conversation that you want to be having much more regularly with your kids. And you're going to want to approach it through curiosity, because you're in one of the best positions to really influence them in how they approach this new landscape, this new dating landscape. And it's challenging because this new dating landscape is so very different from what we experienced when we were young people, and even just the past generations. So I think one of the things to be curious about, and I say this a lot with my students that I work with, the health educators or school officials and parents, is lean in, be curious. And I would say that the first thing to be curious about is, what are all of the words that this new generation are using to describe dating? Because it's not dating anymore. And so one of the barriers, I think, for parents is that, their instinct is, well, my teen's not dating, right? My teen is, they're not really interested in that. But then when we start to kind of deconstruct these new words that they're using and recognizing that they don't really hang out and go on dates anymore with that one person, really they hang out. They call it hanging out, and they're hanging out with a big group of friends. And usually in that big group of friends, there's somebody there that there's a romantic interest in. And so hanging out, talking on the phone, following somebody's social media and liking and posting pictures, this is all part of this new dating landscape. So I would say one of my first, recommendations, and one of the first things I would say to parents is, this is how you start this conversation, is ask your teen or your young person, how do your friends describe dating? How do they describe romantic interest? How do they describe flirting? What's this new landscape? Be curious with them and let them sort of take the lead in educating you with what these new words are. What's so hard about this is that their instinct is to sort of be sneaky about it and to not really want to talk to you about these things. But the more you normalize it, that's what makes it so hard as a parent. The more you normalize it, the more you approach it through curiosity, and maybe even just start asking how their friends' relationships are, right? That might be easier to talk about at first. But I just think that parents are an essential partner in not only modeling what it looks like to have healthy, but then to be that safe place to go to if their child is upset or hurting or frustrated or confused. So really maintaining that kind of relationship where there's great communication, where that young person can come to you no matter what, I think is really, really important. But first start with curiosity and lean in.
Christy, so that's great. And I think, I'm sure there's a fine line between, from a teen point of view, between curiosity and butting in. So yes. What's the best way for parents to support a teenage relationship? I mean, how do you navigate that kind of landscape in terms of support?
So that's a great question, Jan. And I think that one of the things that I always do, whether I'm going into a big classroom full of teenagers or I'm just working one-on-one with them, is I try not to ask too many detailed questions. I kind of try to keep it broad. And I might just say something like, how's your heart feeling this week?
Mhm.
Right. And so by just starting the conversation about your heart and what's your heart feeling like, or, who's somebody that you're interested in getting to know better, right? And what's that look like? Like, explain that to me. I don't get it. I don't get this whole social media thing anymore. How do you get to know somebody through social media, right? So these are some of the questions that I think you can start with, and just being vague. And but I think the key, Jan, is asking on a regular basis, and then
Yes.
watching for these warning signs, right? So there are really defined warning signs when a relationship is unhealthy. You might notice that your teenager starts dressing differently. You might notice that they stop hanging out with their regular friends. You might notice that their grades are starting to slip a little bit. You might notice that they are struggling with some depression and some anxiety that wasn't there before. Now, some of this is challenging because I'm sure every parent listening is going, check, 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 right? That's part of the teenage years. But what you want to be listening for and looking for is isolation, um, dressing differently, being really protective of their phone where they don't want you to see, or they're kind of sneaky about how they're on their phone. And then, if they've given you, if they're friending you on social media, be curious what's going on in their socials. See what their friends are posting, and the comments and things like that. I know some parents that are like, oh, my teenager absolutely will not friend me and doesn't know. But I think that this is part of that communication and that conversation that needs
Yeah.
to continue to take.
So that's a great segue. That was a great answer. That's a great segue into, I want to jump over to Steve. Steve, when we organized these questions, Steve was very wanted to focus on friendships, and you just talked about friends and how important friends are, and if their friends change and so forth. So, Steve, how, in your experience, how important are friends, and how do teens' friendships affect them in ways that can either be healthy or unhealthy?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel. Friends are very important. We have a saying, and I've had a saying for all my years working with youth, and that is, friends do not leave friends behind. So no matter where you're at or where you're going, you don't leave your friend. And if your friend becomes belligerent or confrontational or even challenging and says, no, I'm going to run off with, and I'm going to leave with, and I don't have to come home with you. Friends don't leave friends. We stay together. In my 30 years of working with the county, some of the cases that I received where young women had been sexually assaulted, there were usually friends that had been at the event or the party or wherever they're at and had left them. And so it really ingrained into me the importance of friendship and how as friends we watch each other's backs. And so our friends provide a sense of belonging. They help us feel valued. And they also help us in developing our confidence as young people. And I would submit that even happens to us as adults. Our friends provide a sense of security and comfort that comes from being with other people that are going through similar or like experiences. And that's why we seem to be with our friends. So yeah, I think the message is friends don't leave friends behind.
That's
Yes.
a great message. That's a great message. So Christy had spoken about curiosity and parents and teens sharing with each other. I just remember from my own experience with my own teens that they tended to be more willing to open up to their friends than to their parents. So how can you comment on that? And how do you, as a friend, deal with if your friend comes to you and shares something that is harmful? I mean, how do you deal with that? What kind of advice do you give to your friend, or what do you do in that situation where they're opening up to you, but they're not going to open up to their parents?
Yeah, thank you. From my experience, your friends offer you a supportive space and can generally relate to what you're going through. And as I mentioned, they give us a sense of security and comfort that only comes from being with somebody that has similar experiences to what you're going through. In terms of, when they provide information to you, it really depends on what it is they're talking about. I think some issues rise to if you see something or hear something, you say something. And I know it's difficult. I know it's hard, but in the long run, it's the best thing to do. You have got to find a trusted adult that you can speak with to have an open dialogue and conversation to say what you've heard. It's a heavy burden to carry. When you've been given information and you don't know what to do, you will lose nights of sleeping. You will be worried. You'll make yourself sick because you won't know what to do with the information. And the best advice I could give you, 34 years of working with youth that have either been in trouble or in at-risk situations, being a father, an uncle, a brother, a husband. If you see something, say something. If you hear something, say something. Get a supportive system around you to help you help that friend that has come to you.
Jan,
Yes,
I'd love
ma'am.
to add on to that. One of the
Of
things
course.
that I coach young people is how to actually feel confident in being able to say to a friend, "Hey, are you okay?" And maybe I'm starting to notice some things that are different, and be specific with, here's some things I'm noticing, like I don't get to see you anymore, or you're not showing up for class, and hey, are you okay? I'm worried about you. And then when you get a friend that feels like they can come to you and they can talk to you about anything, then that's the opportunity to say, especially if it's something sketchy or worrisome, or that's the opportunity to say, whoa, God, this is maybe something we might need to ask help for, because I feel overwhelmed, or I don't know what to do, or I'm worried that I might not give the right advice. So practicing with your young people on what they can say to a friend, and then going with them to that
Yeah.
trusted adult, right? So I think that's key, is not just saying, hey, you need a trusted adult. It's like, I got you. I'm going to go with you, and let's figure out who that right trusted adult is, right? We don't want somebody who's going to make it worse, or
Yeah.
escalate and be drama. We want somebody that's going to be calm, that's going to have our back, that's going to see us and hear us and listen to us. And I'm going to go with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, teens, kids, their peers are everything to them. So I think that what you guys have all emphasized is that support system doesn't look the same as an adult teenage support system. But I think it's hugely critical. I'd like to just jump over to Raul for a minute. Raul, I know you've in your work with crisis resolution and your work with youth at the high schools, you've seen a lot. You've got a lot of experience in dealing with at-risk youth, with the issues that we're dealing with. Maybe you can comment from your experience on what you think the biggest challenges are around teen dating or whatever, or teen hanging out or hooking up or whatever the lingo is these days. But maybe you could, from your own personal experience, and Fighting Back Santa Maria Valley is a great organization. The work that they do is hugely important up in the valley. So give us your wisdom.
Thank you. Before I start, thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here. I was also, before starting at Fighting Back, I was a domestic violence advocate with Domestic Violence Solutions. So
that's right.
It's really nice to be back, and especially for this cause, because it's so important.
Thank you. We'll take you back anytime.
Yeah, thank you.
Edwin would kill me.
I think one of the biggest challenges, especially with teen dating at the high school level, is that I always put it to parents this way. Think about when we were that age in high school. Now times that by 20 with social media, that makes whatever situation that's going on a lot bigger. Students or this generation use social media so often, and everything that is done is posted and it's commented. So if there is a relationship, if there is any type of situation that's occurring, it gets exploded really big, which makes it that much harder for students to vocalize some of the issues or conflicts that they have on campus, because then it becomes an issue that's on campus to then sometimes even outside of school and social media, and then friends get involved and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that is one of the hardest challenges for youth right now. Honestly, I think that there's a lot of peer pressure. There's a lot of different labels that go into high school, but add that plus this other black hole of comments and potential pressure from other people that are outside of their own circle sometimes. So that adds another layer of difficulty when even dating or any kind of issue on school campuses.
Yeah, I mean, I think my experience and my observation is that teens they value their privacy, or they share it very judiciously, and so to have your whole life opened up for everyone to comment on, I think can be very hurtful and very serious. And so now I want to jump over to Rachel, who has put together obviously the Youth Well Collaborative to deal with mental and emotional issues that teenagers face. So Rachel, what are I think sometimes, and we see this also at DVS, how can we get people the resources they need? What are the resources both that you're aware of? That I know you're putting together an amazing resource guide that can help both parents and teenagers get the help or support that they need. Maybe you could talk about that, and then we'll kind of go back around for other comments.
So we've just launched an online youth mental health and wellness resource directory, and it's for really families, youth, educators to be able to utilize for our county in accessing the resources they need. Going back though to what Christy talked about and Steve talked about, I think another thing when we think about trusted adults, I think as a parent, it is one of the most important things we can teach our kids. And one of the hardest things is to take our own egos out of it and realize that sometimes we won't be that trusted adult. Yeah. And so when we talk to our kids about it as parents, to talk to them about who the adults are in their lives that they do trust, and to let them know that you realize as a parent, they may not always want to come to you about everything. It might not be comfortable, but you want to help them notice and be aware of the ones that are in their lives, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a coach, so that they also don't feel that guilt. Well, I'm not talking to my mom about it, so maybe it's wrong to go to somebody else. I think so often when it comes to dating and talking to our parents, it can be such a scary road to navigate and feeling judged. And so then when we have kids that are struggling and needing help and services, they don't reach out and ask for help. Another is, I had an experience, or my daughter had an experience a few years ago. She was out in Isla Vista, and I'm so glad that you guys talked about this too with friends. And she was out in Isla Vista walking around and doing whatever they were doing. And she noticed a girl being harassed by a guy. She didn't know this guy, didn't know this girl, but she could tell that the girl was intoxicated. And I was so proud of her because she walked up to them, got in the guy's face and said, she is not in a place to talk to you. She spent 2 hours walking with that girl through Isla Vista until she was sober enough to remember where she lived, and stayed with her until she could get her back to her apartment. And I think that is such an important thing, again, to talk to our kids about. Just, when we talk about resources, half of it is just teaching them how to reach out, how to support each other, how to look out for each other, but also not to take on the weight of the world. That's what I think so many kids are struggling with right now, is feeling so much responsibility for their peers.
Yeah, that's a heavy burden. That's a heavy burden to bear. Well, I want to kind of jump in a little bit. And we are, for those folks listening, we are going to post the resources at the end of this webinar. So, and they'll be available for anyone that is interested or needs those resources. It wouldn't be a webinar in the middle of a global pandemic unless we talked about how COVID-19 and the shutdowns and everything are affecting our teenagers. I want to start a little bit with going back again to Rachel because of the mental health issues. You know, teenagers are, we're a social creature, and teens really value their friends. They value, you know, hanging out with them, you know, just being together. And it's so difficult now. So what are some of the things that you've seen, and how can parents and trusted adults kind of navigate what's going on with this, with the, you know, isolation and just something we've never had to deal with? So some advice for us, Rachel, on that.
So I'm a big believer, you know, both now during COVID and beyond, and when we talk about relationships, in doing everything you can to keep the lines of communication open as a parent. And that's not always easy. As Jan said earlier, I have 3 daughters ranging in age from 18 to 22. And all 3 of them are different. And I think that's another thing as a parent too, is to remember that our kids are all different, and to remember their communication styles are different, their friend groups are different. And so it's not going to be a one size fits all. So to find ways to connect with your kids and to get creative. One of the things I hear from parents of boys often is taking walks, driving in the car. When you're not making eye contact, they're often more likely to open up to you. I've been debating whether to try that with my husband to see if that works with him too.
Great advice.
But I realize, because I've been fortunate, my girls will often be, especially my older girls, open books. But some of the things that I've learned through this has been not overreacting when they give us information. And I find, and again, this goes to dating, mental health issues, grades, when they finally come to us and open up, if our reaction is too big for them, it makes it scarier for them. So to be able to sort of hold our own emotions and responses to what they're saying, and to be able, as Christy said earlier, just to be curious, to kind of just open the conversation up, to say, how can I support you? What can I do right now that's going to support? Do you need to just vent? Do you need advice? To create that safe space for them. I think another thing that's been interesting with COVID, talking to kids of a lot of different ages, is that dating is still happening, but very virtually. So I was kind of assuming that, you know, that wasn't taking place as much, but kids are going through breakups without necessarily having ever had contact with somebody. And all of that can happen without us as parents even know it's taking place, and to see that their emotions are on a roller coaster. So to be aware that dating is still happening, and to put yourself out there to ask the question so that we're continuing to engage.
Oh, great comment.
I don't mean to butt in, but we do have one question that we got in the chat.
Oh, of course.
What are our resources for our most vulnerable group, LGBTQ+ and group of young teens?
So I would recommend Pacific Pride Foundation is one of the strongest LGBTQ+ resources. And I was actually just assisting a student the other day in accessing them, and just want to put out there right now with COVID, all of our organizations are working overtime to meet the needs. And everybody's doing it differently. The teen that I had recently spoken to had reached out and had not gotten a response. And often, especially with young people, they'll try one time and then they'll kind of give up. So anytime that we can make those calls for them and to keep pushing through, because we're not able to get through to offices the way we were. So whether it's trying to call, email, etc., but then do it again. So Pacific Pride is one of the stronger ones. We also do have, they have access to some groups that they provide. We've actually started a calendar, and I'll put the link in there, various support groups for both parents and youth, so that people can drop into things on a more regular basis. I think right now, even though there's a lot of Zoom fatigue and burnout, we have a lot of young people who are feeling so disconnected, and everybody's family is different and how often they're letting their kids out right now to connect with other young people.
So in terms of just the, Raul, talking about some of the, your work has been primarily in schools. How is that work being reshaped by COVID, and how are you reaching those teenagers?
So it's all distance, especially here in Santa Maria. They're on a special schedule. And one thing that I'm noticing a lot with a lot of my students is that, as adults, we have a lot of pressure and a lot of things going on with COVID, but these students have less control than we do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So to me, I always like to put it that way to parents. Like, if we're adults and we're supposed to know what's going on, and our nervous system and we're kind of on edge, how are our youth doing, right? When I do meet with my students, because I do meet with them on Zoom, I literally put it as simple as this: let's just do the best we can. They have a lot of stress, COVID, friends, school, distance learning, responsibilities at home, and just leave it at that. Let's do the best we can. If there's any way I can support you, let's do this. If I need to contact a teacher, if I need to contact a counselor, if I need to talk to your parents, let's do that. To me, we are all in this together, and I'm not gonna, or I think we shouldn't add any more pressure to people in the type of situation that we're in right now. I think we all just need to work together as well as we can and support one another. So that's my approach. And I know that that's a lot of my coworkers' approach, especially in Santa Maria, is that we're just meeting our youth where they're at. And we're literally just here to help you, I always just kind of let my students know that I'm not your counselor. I'm not your therapist. I'm just here to help you. So if that means that I need to go drop off a hotspot so you can do your homework, great. If that means that me talking to your parents or talking to a teacher about something that's going to make it a little bit easier for you to be successful in school, great. Yeah.
So that's a great answer. I wanted to kind of swing back to Christy for a minute, and then to Steve, something we had talked about before we started the webinar. But if you take a snapshot of what's happening now with teens and their relationships, and for lack of a better word, just overall abuse, whether it's emotional, digital, whatever, compared to, like, let's say last year or the year before, what are the differences that you're seeing? I know at DVS or at our clients and in our counseling, we've seen a really big increase in complex mental issues as well as lethality. The level of violence has gone up tremendously. So I was just wondering how you would sort of put a shape around that this year versus last year or the year before.
Well, I think we've heard a lot, at least I have, in the news around the tremendous spikes in domestic violence and increase in lethality. So they're more violent, more dangerous, and more deadly since COVID began, because our families are having to isolate at home with abusive partners. And so I think a lot of the conversation has been sort of centered around adult survivors, but teen dating abuse has also seen staggering spike and continues to be a pervasive and dangerous problem. We have seen in our work a very marked increase in the abuse. And what's been challenging for us is that I call, Jan, you're familiar with this, it's the silent epidemic. I call it the silent epidemic that most people aren't aware of or don't feel comfortable talking about, and it's the least funded. So here we are seeing this huge, especially when we talk about prevention, here we are seeing this huge increase in our young people experiencing physical, digital, emotional, and sexual violence. And yet we don't have the resources to pull in so that we can provide a level of care for these young people. And so I think definitely am seeing that in our work. I have seen a sharp increase in sexual violence since
Yeah.
the beginning of the pandemic. And I think one of the biggest barriers and challenges right now is that, especially around sexual violence, our young people want to see people in person. and that makes it doubly hard, especially if the topic is really sensitive. Some of our young people that are experience this type of abuse haven't told their parents that they're actually hanging out or dating somebody. So that's another barrier. Like the people that are going to protect me and keep me safe, or that I can go to, are the people that I don't want them to know what's happening. So we've really worked hard at coming alongside the schools and the health educators to rethink how we were delivering our curriculum. And so we wanted to make that as seamless as possible for the health educators so that they can continue to have these conversations with all of their students. We've worked really hard at doubling down with our social media presence, especially on Instagram, because that's really the place to really reach our this generation. So really getting them connected to the ability to text for help. So 95% of teens, when you ask them if they'd rather talk to a person on the phone or in person or texting, they'll say texting 9 times out of 10.
Yeah,
So
that's the go-to.
that's the go-to. So we've partnered with a national organization. It's the Crisis Text Line. We have our own identifier, which is hello. So by using hello, we're able to sort of track how many teens are texting in. And then we're also able to track what some of the content is. And
Oh, wow.
one of the biggest content areas that they're calling, or they're texting in and asking for support and help, and maybe just somebody to listen, is around unhealthy relationships. So
Yeah.
that's how we know that we're seeing this big spike. So getting our teens connected to, so they text hello to 741-741, and it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, English and in Spanish, and a very kind, well-trained person, a younger person. So these are mostly college students that are closer to their age. We'll text with them as long as they need, and then get them connected to additional resources if that teen is asking for additional kind of support and help. So we've worked really hard at getting that out there. And then we've also launched this whole new it's like having your own personal dating coach, but it's all through Instagram. So we have videos, we have ways for teens to ask questions and to send us DM us private messages, and then we'll answer, and we'll get them engaged and involved, and then get them connected to those mental health resources that they're so yearning for right now.
That's great to know, and I want to make sure that we get all those resources. Something that Steve had commented on before we started the webinar was sort of the delta between CWS, Child Welfare Services calls, and then out-of-home placements of kids. And so, Steve, maybe you could talk about that, because I think again, sort of going back to not having those eyes and ears on the ground, we're missing a lot of stuff, a lot of abuse. And when everything opens back up, we're looking at, are the floodgates going to open? So again, I don't know whether you're specifically talking about younger kids, but I would assume that there's a lot around teens as well. So maybe you could share that with our listeners.
Thank you. March 16th is the day the world changed, I think, definitely for Santa Barbara County, in terms of being advised that our schools were closed and the children would no longer be attending school in person. Our agency, like that week, moved to telehealth, and by the end of the week moved to telecommunication for the non-therapist people. And we employed strategies such as scavenger hunts with the children to be able to do an inventory of what they have and to see what they need, so that we could meet them where they're at to provide services. But what we cannot see is we cannot see the abuse. So the trauma that these children are going through, whether it be physical abuse, emotional abuse, the high level of poverty, homelessness, instability in terms of food being given, how to allocate and get food to these children, and then the stressors that come along with just adverse childhood experiences, and then these external environments, violence in the community, the civil unrest, the not being able to have that social emotional connection in our schools, and the connectivity with adults, caring, loving adults that we call teachers and nurses and those people that work in the schools. So we don't see, and what we're not seeing is the number of referrals. So what I was reporting on earlier is we were applying for a grant, and we took a study from the Department of Social Services, which indicate that the number of child protective services referrals are down, while the number of out-of-home placements for children is up, which would seem to indicate that we don't have the eyes and ears that we normally have on our children to be able to report abuse or suspected abuse, and allow those of us that are sitting here at the table and our colleagues, all of our other colleagues throughout the county, to intervene in the lives of these children and get them the services they need before we get to a point where we remove them from the home.
Great. I don't know if we have any other questions. We're sort of edging towards our conclusion, and I wanted to be able to ask each of you if you could share sort of, and I know, Rachel, you shared a great story about your daughter, maybe an anecdotal vignette from this last year that brings home the idea of how much our teens need our support. And then what's one piece of advice? I know we got this. Steve had a few really good, and all of you had really good sort of succinct nuggets of advice. But parents out there, I think, are really craving. They're craving support. They're craving advice. They're craving just connection. And so maybe, Rachel, let's start with you. I know you already shared about your daughter, but any, maybe 2 minutes on what your final piece of advice is, and maybe an upbeat story, again, additionally to the one that you already shared.
So I think one of the things that I'd like to share is just, I talk to parents and I talk to young people who talk about the fact that there's a lot of kids who aren't in relationships, haven't dated, haven't had those experiences. So I find sometimes when you hear about these things, you go, oh, that doesn't pertain to my child yet. I don't need to worry about that. I love to talk to kids about how important it is that we look at our friendships. Friendships are the starting place for any relationships. So as parents, it's something that we can start with before our kids even start dating, is talking about healthy friendships and what those look like, and what do toxic relationships look like, because those can translate into our future relationships. And so it's not this 10 years down the road, we can start doing this when my child's 16. It's more like my child's 8 now, and they're making friends, and they're at elementary school. And as parents, we're role modeling what relationships look like. So just to not check out just because your child may not be in a relationship yet, but really talk to them and have them think about the healthy friendships in their lives. This is a terrible story, actually, but I grew up in Santa Barbara and was just having this conversation with my husband the other night. I don't see any of my friends that I grew up with in high school. And he joked around that he helped me get rid of them when we started dating when I was in my early 20s, because I did not have a lot of healthy friendships. And I wasn't aware of it until much later on when I started having healthy friendships. And so I just think that's a great thing that we can start early with our young people. And then a really positive thing that I would share, I have had all 3 of my daughters and watched all 3 of them in relationships, and it's been interesting and hard and fun and just the roller coaster of emotions. But one of the things that I really appreciated was I was walking with my daughter a couple of years ago on the beach, and she was in her 3rd year of college. And she had been in a really unhealthy relationship in high school and then had started a healthier relationship in college. And she started asking me a lot of questions about my husband and I and our relationship and how we met. And it was such a sign of maturity and such a neat thing, because so often our kids seem so bored with us and are rolling their eyes at anything we say. And all of a sudden she was translating in her mind, Mom and Dad have a relationship. And now I kind of want to understand this. And how do you guys like work out your arguments and da 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 da. So it made me realize too that I needed to be more aware of modeling healthy conflict to my kids too. Because of my background, what I came from, I sort of am really private about how we have those discussions and realize that's not always healthy either, that we need to model not always being happy with each other and how do we talk those things out.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Rachel. Steve, what about you? I know you're such a great family man. You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So give us a little story and then some advice.
Well, my advice is we're all in this together. And the success has been the collaborative approach that all of us have taken. Every single one of us at this table and our partners in the agency share the same core value belief, which is serving people and serving our community and helping our community. What we do and how we do may be different, but not our purpose. Our purpose is for a healthy community, healthy children, and to be able to help the adults. I think one of the greatest success stories has happened is when a young mother pulled up to our business in Santa Maria. And, all of our businesses are closed with signs and COVID signs and whatnot and called these numbers. But she pounded on the glass. And so we opened the door with our mask on to see if we could help her. And she was in distress. And she didn't know what she was going to do. She was homeless. She was living in the van with her children. And while she had Chromebooks and Wi-Fi connectivity, she didn't know how she was going to provide the services for those kids. I didn't know how she was going to provide the services for those kids either. But fortunately, our clinical director, Nancy Johnson, was able to help us and help her. And it's the partnerships and the relationships that we have with each other that allow us to network at a greater pace than someone that doesn't know a nonprofit, right? We can call when we get that parent that says, please don't tell me for the third time you can't help me. I need help. We will not let that parent go. I don't think any of us will. We will find you the help that you need. So I think the success that I'm seeing is, and I think we all are, is that I have never imagined a world where we would have collaborated as much as we have. I mean, we're working with Youth Well, Fighting Back Santa Maria, Edwin and his team, just all these agencies that are out there. So I see that the silver lining beyond this pandemic has been that we have come together as a community to serve our community and to be there for our families. So my advice is don't give up. Please, we listed our information. We have a parent warm line. We have parenting classes. We have relationship classes, as I'm sure many people do. Look at our websites, give us a call, be persistent, don't give up. If you don't get a call back right away, please keep calling. We will get to you. We will get to you.
Thank you, Steve. That's awesome. Raul, some of your final thoughts. A good story and your advice.
Okay, so I have an excellent story I just found out today. So when I first started with Fighting Back, I was working with a student who was college bound, but was having some issues with his girlfriend, actually. So I took that role of mentor and helped him out through that breakup and all that stuff. He ends up going to Fresno State, where I graduated, and he let me know today that he's graduating in May. So unfortunately, awesome. I won't be able to go to the graduation, but I'm so happy and proud that, he's going to graduate. He's one of my success stories. And more than anything, I think that just validates that what we do works. What we do works. Just being a positive influence, a positive adult in a person's lives. In a teen's life, could really impact their life. So I want to leave that. My advice would be for the parents, just to kind of piggyback on what Rachel said, you guys are the most important example and role model for your guys' kids. I know at times it doesn't always look that way. It doesn't seem that way, but your guys' example is where teens learn how to communicate. They learn how to have discussions, how they learn to love, how they learn boundaries. All that is taught, or should I say, seen by how you guys illustrate that at home.
Yeah. To go back and reread my parenting book. Christy, bring us home here, and then I'm going to wrap it up, but I don't know, it doesn't look like we have other questions. So give us a really good success story and then a very succinct piece of advice.
Well, the first thing I want to say to parents is to take a really deep breath and to know that this year has been hard and you're not alone and that you're doing the best you can. So I want parents to really feel that that it's okay and you're not alone, and we're going to get through this. And there's lots of organizations here in town that want to support you and help you. One of the things that I would say to parents is the first thing that you can do for your young people is to take good care of yourself and to make sure that you are filling yourself back up. And if that's, being able to take a walk, being able just to sit in silence for 5 minutes and just, to practice your breathing, whether that's reading your favorite book for the 15th time, whatever it is that, whatever you need to do to take good care of yourself so that you have something left over. Something I've been noticing my sister doing, she's a nurse at Cottage, and she's working remotely right now, doing telehealth. And she's got her 5-year-old on one side, who started kindergarten this year, that she's homeschooling. And she's got the 10-year-old on the other side, that's, much more interested in playing video games with her friends than actually doing her classwork. And, she's like, I am going to explode by the end of my day because she's just so overwhelmed. And so what I've been noticing that she's been doing lately is that she's been finding little opportunities to go down to the beach during low tide and to look for sea urchins. They've roller skating down at Gersh Park or down at the harbor, or going for little nature hikes at Rocky Nook Park. Like, we have so much beauty and access to nature here in town. And I'm just noticing that it's shifted her ability to be patient. So I would just say, do your best to take care of yourself, get out there in nature, and know that you're not alone. As far as a story goes, Raul, I had something similar this week. I had a young person that I helped. This got to be at least 12 or 15 years ago. She was a young person at one of our local high schools who had experienced some dating violence, and some very public dating violence happened in the hallway during passing period. So there was this humiliation factor. And I remember when I first met her, I spent several days and hours and weeks and months and years with this young person, really supporting her and helping her to really identify healthy again, because she forgot that she was worthy. And so now she's graduated from college and she's going to graduate school, and she sent me a message on her Instagram and is actually going into, relationship education. And it just warmed my heart because she worked so hard to learn and to grow and to heal from, what she'd experienced. And now she's passing that along to this next generation. So I love seeing that.
Those are absolutely fantastic stories.
It's the gem.
I love it. So first of all, we are at the end. I do want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time, for sharing your thoughts, for sharing pieces of yourself with us and with our listeners. I want to echo something I think that Steve said, and those of you that know me know, I've been in the nonprofit sector for a long time, and I'm so grateful and proud to still be part of this sector. I've watched agencies step up. I've watched them come together to really create truly a safety net for our community. I don't know what Santa Barbara County would have done without their community-based organizations. And the people that work in this sector, I mean, obviously we're not, we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it for the love. And those little drops of love that I think everyone has expressed, they grow into the future, and we're creating a better world down the line for our kids and for their kids. And I think that's what's really important. So I just want to let you all know how much I appreciate what you're doing. Julia has put up the contact information. We'll get the resources. And again, I really want to echo what Steve said, because I know for us, being a crisis intervention agency and overwhelmed, if you need help, don't give up, because I think we all have those connections, the resources that Rachel talked about, that Christy has talked about. We all have those connections, and we can get people help. We might not be able to do it that 1 second or that in that one little minute that they call or they hang up or whatever, but we'll get them the resources. And I also want to let everyone know that, again, we need support. All of our organizations need support, whether it's volunteers or funding, advocacy. I think Christy mentioned, or in her bio, mentioned that she works with legislators to elevate the need for prevention. I mean, we know as a domestic violence agency, by the time people get to us, we're at the end of the line. I'd rather invest resources up front for those preventative services. So if you can help, all the websites are there. Everything helps. So I just want to thank you all and let you go about your evening. But again, and thanks to my fabulous staff, Jenny, Elise, and Julia, for putting this all together. So ladies, you're the best.
Thanks, Jan, so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank
You guys are
you.
wonderful.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time.
Thank
We
you, guys.
appreciate you all so much.
Bye.
Now
Good
enjoy your
evening.
Wednesday night.
Yay.
Bye.
Are you logging us off, Julia? Yeah.